Welcome in, everybody, to the latest episode of the Flagship Podcast. This is the preview Flagship Podcast. Joining us to preview Saturday's Big 12 opener between the Texas Longhorns and the Texas Tech Red Raiders is Jarret Johnson, publisher of InsideTheRedRaiders.com. Jarret Johnson, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. After an intro like that, it's hard to live up to it, man. You have that announcer's voice going for you. That's awesome, Chip. How are
Well,
y'all?
man, I'm fired up. I'm excited about this game. Maybe it's because of the crazy, zany, wacky game last year in Lubbock when no one was suspecting Texas would have an issue with Texas Tech, and they were down 15 with 3:13 to play, and somehow, some way, Texas got that game into overtime and ended up winning the game. But Jarret, when I look at this year's Texas Tech team, I mean, you tell me, but you bring in Tyler Shuck, the quarterback from Oregon, and then you and I were talking yesterday about some of the transfers who've come in, and Matt Wells said today, we're recording, of course, on Tuesday, that this is a veteran team he's bringing to Austin, Texas. He sounds confident. Who are some of the new faces? And tell us about Tyler Shuck.
Well, first off, starting off with Shuck, everybody remembers Mahomes when he was at Tech, but of course they had like the worst defense in college football. Statistically, maybe the worst defense in the history of college football, or at least up there. So that always offset what Pat could do offensively. It felt like he had to score every possession. Since Pat's been there, this is the most talented quarterback, and it's not even close that Tech has fielded. He's Shuck's 6'5", 225 pounds. He has a legitimate arm. One of those out. If you don't wear gloves, if you're not really ready for it, it'll rip the leather will rip the skin off your hands. That kind of arm. Throws a great deep ball. Has the ability to take some touch off it on some of the shorter passes or routes that he needs to. He also has surprising speed at his size. He's not really a juke stick kind of guy, but when the play breaks down, he can move the chains. He can outrun even some linebackers in this league for that corner to move the chains, which is kind of surprising to see in person because of his size, to be honest. Now,
Yeah,
on the
because
other hand,
6'5", 230.
225, yeah.
25?
Yep. Yep. So
Yeah.
he looks it. You know what I mean? Some of those guys don't look it. He looks it in person. Now, on the other hand, he is somewhat green. Now, he started 10 games now, which, that's not – he's not like a noob out there, but at the same time, he's going through some growing pains, which we saw. He threw a couple interceptions against Stephen F. Austin, also had a strip sack, but then he comes back and puts up, the best performance in his career last week against Florida International with almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns, plays flawless football. So it's kind of – and I think this is going to be a key, really. Everybody's talking about the running games and the defense's ability to stop the running game on both sides, but I think it's going to be – and I guess you could say this a lot of times, but I think it's going to come down to which quarterback or quarterbacks play the most efficient football this Saturday. Is probably going to lead his team to victory.
Well, we know that we'll stay with the offense for a minute. We know that Matt Wells is going to run tempo. He's going to go fast. Texas ran into that in the second half against Arkansas, did not fare well. The defense was worn down from being on the field the whole first half, but that didn't go well. Tell us what people can expect from this Texas Tech offense. Obviously, receiver Eric Ezukanma, all Big 12, one of the best receivers in the country, 6'3", 220 pounds, will run by you, will run over you. And then I gotta know more about. I was ready for SaRodorick Thompson, but tell me about my man Taj, who's averaging 8.1 yards per carry. Jarret.
Yeah. You said it with EZ. Obviously, both Tech and Texas have had great receivers over the years. EZ's in the pantheon. He's legit. He's one of those guys you could throw. And I think we're going to see this with the way Texas plays defense, trying to keeps everything in front of him. You're going to see that EZ can catch a quick hitch or a screen and is very elusive after the catch. But he also is a deep threat. So, EZ's the complete package. Now, in terms of Taj, Yeah, he's a guy out of Manor, Texas now who was very productive. I mean, in high school. And I went and saw him play in person and was like, okay, some guys either have it or they don't in terms of running back chops. And what I mean by that is he knows how to set up his blocks. He has excellent vision. He's able to jump out of gaps that have been plugged into open gaps. And he also pushes the power forward. He showed up on campus last year as a true freshman at about 205. Now he's up to 220. He's really pushing 225, but he's still retained that, the speed that he does have. He's more of I guess, a home run hitter, more explosive than I was expecting for him at this level. He was in high school, but of course that's another beast. He's been very explosive so far when given this opportunity with Sir Roderick being hurt early on or recovering from his offseason shoulder surgery. But Sir Roderick's back. I actually asked Coach Wells today, Tuesday, about Sir Roderick. He said, no, he's good to go. So, they really like, and for me, it's easy to say more because Tech hasn't had a lot of depth at the running back position in 5-6 years. This is easily the deepest they've been at running back since I've been here. And this is my ninth season consecutively covering Texas Tech exclusively. So it's just not even close, really, in terms of the depth. And Taj is a big part of that.
Well, we talk about Tyler Shuck, a guy who played at Oregon last year, as you mentioned, helped them go to the Pac-12 championship. And then you've got a running game with Taj Brooks, who's averaging 8.1 yards per carry. Texas fans will appreciate that because that's what Bijan Robinson averaged he averaged 8.2 last year as a freshman. And that set the UT record dating back 50 years for highest yards per carry average for a season. And then you add in Eric Ezukanma. I keep hearing about Texas Tech's offensive line not being quite what it should be, but
I get your point. Yeah.
I mean, Eric Ezukanma is averaging 116 yards receiving per game. He's leading the Big 12.
I get what you're saying. And there's some truth to that. I think that's what we're all trying to figure out is this offense legit or not because of the competition. Now, it looked good against Houston, and that is at least something, especially in that second half where they outscored the Cougars by 31-0. But they didn't look good against Stephen F. Austin. And then they didn't have the ball a lot, even against Houston. Now, they put together a complete performance last week, but it was against Florida International at home. How much stock can you put in that? Well, I don't know. That's a good question. So obviously the level of competition rises quite a bit this week. And I think that's what we're all interested to see is how are they going to do against the Longhorns, which is, easily the most talented team they faced this year. And, the offensive line, look, I like TJ Storman at left tackle. He was a second team All Big 12 performer for TCU, came over. That's an upgrade. Dawson Deaton's a 4-year starter at center. He's good. So really it starts coming down to what do those guards do? What is this young Caleb Rogers who he played a lot as a true freshman last year, which is always scary. Offensive lineman plays as a true freshman. But he grew some, developed some in the offseason. He does have talent, but is he ready for Texas? We don't know. So we're going to find out a lot about this offense because if you don't have a good offensive line, all those shiny, cars there, all those Ferraris like an EZ or Corvette like a Taj Brooks, they don't mean a whole lot if you can't block for them. So there's a lot of questions out there still, even though we're 3 games into the season about the offensive line and the offense as a whole.
Well, one thing I've noticed talking to Jarret Johnson, publisher of InsideTheRedRaiders.com, have been the slow starts. I think they've trailed early in every game this year. They're 3-0, as you mentioned. They beat Houston. They beat Stephen F. Austin. That was a scary game. We'll get to that in a second. But Florida International. But they trailed early in those games. What is there a trend there to the slow start?
Yeah. I mean, there is. You just mentioned it. That is a trend. The one thing, I guess the counterpoint would be that they did come roaring back in all those games. The Stephen F. Austin game was very scary. I mean, to put it in perspective, the Lumberjacks, which, I mean, look, Texas and Tech both have almost been victims. Texas was a victim on the hardwood, and now Tech, I mean, came very close to suffering their most embarrassing loss in program history. Stephen F. Austin had goal to go with under 2 minutes left, down 6. I mean, it was right there. We were looking at each other at the press box like, is this really going to happen? It's like, let's see. They held them out. And in terms of the trend of, starting slow and all that. Yeah, the good thing is that Tech does have more depth, and especially on defense. I mean, it's not even close than they've had since I can remember, and that has paid dividends. I mean, that's why they crushed Houston in the second half, 31-0. That's why they were able to come back and hold Stephen F. Austin back mercifully, and then that's why they overwhelmed Florida International, and that game was over by halftime. But yeah, at first it was pretty scary for Texas Tech fans out there. So the consensus is if they start slow like that against Texas in Austin, they likely won't be able to make that kind of comeback against, like, again, a higher caliber team, more talented team.
We'll take a quick break here with Jarret Johnson of InsideTheRedRaiders.com. Don't go anywhere. We'll talk about Texas Tech, their view of Texas now that they're leaving for the SEC and all that good stuff. And if you're watching us on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel, we'll continue to roll on with Jarret. Jarret, before we let's get to the Tech defense, and we'll get into all the buzz around this game with Texas now entering Big 12 play as a future SEC member. But the defense, you mentioned it, deeper than they've been. And Matt Wells said today, the strength of their defense is the front seven. And I think he feels pretty good about the run defense of Texas Tech. What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with him. You have veteran, talented guys up front on the defensive line. Jalen Hutchings at times has ended drives himself with consecutive plays, sacks and tackles for losses and pressure and stuff like that. He's a guy that as a junior in high school at 275 pounds ran for 800 yards and 8 touchdowns when their starting running back went down. So he's 300 pounds, but he's very athletic. Tony Bradford was the best defensive player on the best high school defensive team in Texas at the Galena Park North Shore team that had that epic game against Duncanville in the state championship. And he's developed and come on. And those two guys are stalwarts up front, big-time leaders. But you can go down the list up front. But really, you go to linebacker, and that's where it's at. And it's weird, right, to say the first thing you should think of with Texas Tech is linebacker. This doesn't sound right.
Yeah, it hasn't happened since my man
Zach Thomas. Yeah. But, I mean, Colin Schooler, he's up there with the best in the Big 12. Rico Jeffers, big-time team leader, probably the best pass rusher, period, on the whole team. He's a guy they blitz a lot. He already has a pick six and a couple sacks on the season. Just a really good player. Christian Merriweather, this guy's a freak. He's such a good sideline player that really the defense hasn't skipped a beat despite losing Jordan Brooks, who was an All-American and first-round draft pick, who's tearing it up for Seattle right now, which that's really surprising to me. But he's a guy that on his official visit to Tech, in full pads, helmet, and everything in the practice facility, did a backflip. So that's the kind of talent, athleticism this guy had, 235 pounds.
Christian Merriweather,
yeah. So he's a really good player in terms of sideline to sideline. But then you got Jacob Morgenstern, who comes in and provides depth, 6'4", 225. He's kind of a safety linebacker hybrid. He's one of those super seniors who's been around forever. He played at Duke. This is his second year at Tech. He's added some toughness. Like I said, versatility. They got a guy from Florida who transferred in, and this kind of goes back to some of those transfers that you talked about that I don't think I really answered because I got carried away talking about Tyler Shuck. But Josiah Pierre, 6 foot, 245 pounds. He's like third string linebacker for Tech right now, and he's good. This guy would have been like on the front page of the media guide like 4 years ago for Tech, and he's like third string. So that gives you an idea of the depth at Tech. And all these guys are playing to rotate them in constantly throughout the game so that at the end of the game, they're actually fresh, which to Texas, that may not sound crazy, but at Texas Tech on defense, this is a big difference. This is a big change. What I like to say is like they have a legitimate Power 5 roster on defense now with some guys that look the part, and that depth should help them, not just in games, late in games, but later in the season, because we all know it's a battle of attrition out there because such a long season.
Yeah, where's the weakness on defense? Is there one?
Yes, pass defense. They're still susceptible. They're better in the back end, but they're still giving up they're still letting guys run free a little too much. It's not as much explosive plays like we're used to seeing with Tech, but offense, I said the offensive line's a weakness, and you'll see it immediately. You're like, okay, this is where they're not as good as you'd like them to be, maybe, and then in the secondary, that's where like they're not as tight in coverage as you want like a really good team to be. But they brought in a guy named Reggie Pearson who started as a redshirt freshman for Wisconsin team that went to the Rose Bowl. He was known as the hardest hitting guy on a Wisconsin defense. That tells you something right there. Marquis Waters is another safety they brought in from Duke. He was known as one of the better players in the ACC in the secondary, and he just got a pick six last week. Reggie Pearson was Big 12 newcomer of the week the first week. So those guys are legitimate players. At corner, DeMarcus Fields is a good football player, because he is. But the other corner spot is susceptible. They're susceptible to those quick slot guys to get too many yardage, get too open on Tech. So that's where they can be had. And Texas, certainly, looking at the receivers, they have the personnel to attack it. And that's really where I expected the battle to come down to is, okay, these defenses, they're going to trade shots with these rushing attacks. I think both teams will get theirs at times and get stymied at times. What are these quarterbacks going to be able to do? Are they going to be able to take advantage of the secondaries when they have to? When it's 3rd and 8, we know they're passing. Who's going to win those battles? Now, I don't know. It's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, because you look at Texas Tech special teams, Austin McNamara is one of the best punters in the Big 12. The field goal kicker is 3 of 3. I saw as long as only 34 yards.
He's got a leg. He can kick it from 50. So
they're solid on special teams.
Their punt return has been a problem. They've had a couple fumbles this year. They're working a couple, or muffs, whatever they call it. There's been a couple of turnovers in the punt return game. So that's something to watch. But other than that, special teams has been solid, which, that ended up being a huge storyline in the last matchup, of course, with the sky kick and then the onside kick, all that. Houston, in the second possession of the game, they tried an onside kick and were able to get it against Tech. So, there are issues. But overall, I would say, the special team's pretty solid, especially the specialists.
Well, Sonny Cumbie leaving TCU to go to Texas Tech was an interesting storyline, especially considering, it's not exactly clear how safe and secure Matt Wells is as the head coach there in Lubbock. You tell us, first and foremost, how safe and secure is Matt Wells, and then secondly, how Sonny Cumbie's doing in his return home.
Those are two big separate questions there, Chip. They're good questions.
Those are big, meaty questions.
I would say this. It's well known here that there was almost a change at the head coach position at the end of last year. There wasn't. They pivoted. David Yost, the offensive coordinator, was relieved of his duties, and they brought in Sonny Cumbie. Now, bringing in Sonny Cumbie is like, he's probably the most well-liked guy, or at least he was before the season started. You know how it goes. In terms of, he's just, he was a great quarterback here. He's just a great guy. He's one of those real personable West Texans that everybody likes. You have to travel far and wide to find somebody to say anything negative about Sonny Cumbie as a human being. Now, in terms of going back to Coach Wells, is he safe and secure? No. Tech has had a long stretch, way before, Coach Wells came in, of losing seasons. And Tech fans are sick of losing. They had that long stretch with Leach where they always were at least competitive. They went to a bowl game for decades, every season. And then every once in a while, they'd rise up and win 9 or 10 games, put some scares into the Texases and the Oklahomas of the world. And that just hasn't been the case. They've been more down towards the bottom, towards Kansas, and teams and fans are sick of it, and as they should be. And then Coach Wells starting with a couple of tough, 4-win season in his first year, and then last year in 10 games, only 4 wins. And that, quite honestly, that Texas loss was really tough. Because they should have won that game, and then so many things had to happen for Texas to come back, which did happen. Which Coach Wells, I asked him about that today. Like, is this program even over that loss yet? Surely the people in this building are excited to get another opportunity at this team that they should have beat last year. In so many words, I asked him. I was expecting coach speak, but he didn't really give me coach speak. I mean, and then EZ was also up there, and he said, "Look, Coach Wills mentions this game a lot. It was the biggest L last year because we should have won and the opponent and all that. So this is a big game for them, and that was a big game for Coach Wells to lose that. So winning it, this week would go a long way for him with fans, with the administration here, all that. Because like you said, I mean, Tech does seem to have a better team than they have had in a couple of years. Like this is a bowl eligible team, which isn't saying a whole lot, but then again, Tech hadn't been to a bowl in years now. So that would be an accomplishment. In terms of Cumbie, like you said, the fan bases are funny, right? I mean, it's off the charts in terms of like what people expect of offense here at Texas Tech, as you know. So it's very like defense is like you could be in the 80s nationally and be like, hey, we're doing pretty good. That's how the fans are. You could be in the 20s and like, man, this team is terrible in offense. What are they doing? So that's kind of what we're seeing in terms of like, I feel like Sonny Cumbie's doing a good job of mixing things up. He's got a new quarterback, new left tackle. He's a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of newness in the offense. And I think, they're undefeated. They put up some points here, but the natives are restless in terms of his play calling. I think the jury is still out with what fans think about Sonny Cumbie as an offensive coordinator, but of course, people love the man.
Well, Jarret, obviously crazy summer, Texas and Oklahoma accept invitations to join the Southeastern Conference effective 2025, although it'll probably happen before that. What is the mindset of Texas Tech players? We know the fans they just want to grab, Bevo and throw him in a ditch. But, what's the mentality, do you think? Is this on the radar yet for Tech players?
Now, players, of course, we talked to them Big 12 Media Day and through all the media days about this. And I really believe this. Most of these guys are and they're young. Think about when you're young, you're so stuck in today and what you're doing right now. A lot of these guys, it's a veteran team. So it's not even really going to affect them. I mean, at least half this roster is going to be gone within the next year or two. So, and I'm not saying I have no idea how long Texas and Oklahoma are going to be a part of the Big 12. I don't, we'll see about that. I know what people are saying publicly. We'll see about that. But I think most of these guys are just dealing with the here and now. They don't really care about that. It's funny to talk about, I feel like they feel like, but not, it's just not really on the forefront of their brain. Now, the fans, absolutely. I mean,
if this game was in Lubbock, let's say this game was in Lubbock.
Oh, if this game was in Lubbock, oh, yeah. I mean, it's, in the basketball game, what is it, February 1st? I mean, they're, as they're saying, they're buying all their batteries and all that stuff, like people like to say it all, which is a joke, of course. But it's yeah. I mean, I would say the hate for Texas has never been higher. It's funny because it's not. I'm not seeing that for Oklahoma, other than there's been some interesting comments from the admin being surprised at Oklahoma admin and the way all this was handled. Other than that, like the fans, seems like all the anger is toward Texas, which is, I don't know, it's funny to me. I'll a couple of things. I know you're awesome with realignment coverage. I mean, you've been awesome with it for years. And of course, anything you do with realignment is gold, right? Like any kind of content you put out, I mean, it's going to get like an unbelievable amount of hits. I mean, any little nugget is just so I love it from that perspective. But from a fan's perspective, I may be the only person in the country who am just so bored by it. I just like until something tangible happens, which here we are, we find ourselves in. And I think the first reaction from fans was panic. I just think of that gif of Kevin Bacon at Animal House, remain calm. That's what I felt like. Everything's fine. It's not. Everything isn't fine. But I think some of the developments, I think people, not everybody, but the majority of fans that I encounter feel a lot better about the Big 12 moving forward than they did initially. Initially, it was like, it's over. The Big 12's done. What are we going to do? Are we going to have a place at the big boy table when the music stops? That was the whole thing. Now, I think they think people feel better about the additions than the thought of the additions before all the excitement, surrounding them.
Yeah, obviously the additions of of Houston, Central Florida, BYU, and Cincinnati. Um, so let me ask you this, Jarret. How do you see this game playing out on Saturday at 11 a.m. at Darrell K. Royal Texas Memorial Stadium?
I don't have a feel for like is Tech's going to get off to a slow start. In covering football for so long, when coaches put an emphasis on something, which they're going to put an emphasis on that. Like you mentioned, can't get off to a slow start against Texas. So I wouldn't surprise me if Tech actually got off to a good start, and then Texas came back, and then I don't know which way that's going to happen. That wouldn't surprise me either way. But I do feel like there's going to be a point midway or the end of the third where it's going to be a close game. And there's going to be some mistake or some huge play. Something is going to happen in this crazy game that's going to turn the tide. And that's just, I don't know. I've had that feeling really since the end of last week. And this was set up. And we saw UT was just drubbing Rice, which was no shocker, of course. And Tech had already put the game away by halftime against FIU. I couldn't help but start thinking about this game. And I was just like, I really feel like this is, again, going to be a close game. Now, who's going to win? I don't know. I honestly haven't even made a prediction in my head or on radio or on Inside the Red Raiders or anything because I'm not sure yet. But before the season, I had Texas winning this game, but I really think it's going to be close. I really do.
Yeah, it's amazing. This game always seems to be close, and I don't know. I'm with you. The line I think opened at 11. It dropped to 9, and that still feels too high. I would take Texas Tech in the points.
Yeah.
You know,
Anything over a touchdown, I think I would take Tech. Anything under that, I don't know. Because that's
yeah,
just that's just one play. I mean,
yeah,
that's what I don't know about you, but even if I didn't do this for a living, I wouldn't gamble on
yeah,
sports. That's other stuff's different, but because you'll see like a Sir Roderick or a Robinson just rip off a 70-yarder that doesn't really have anything to do with the game. You lose money there that way. So all you out there who gamble on football, man, say a prayer for y'all because I don't think my heart can take it.
yeah. Yeah. Well, Jarret, great stuff, man. I am fascinated by the game on Saturday, and everybody needs to get over to InsideTheRedRaiders.com. And of course, if you're an annual member at horns247.com, you have access, VIP access to the content on InsideTheRedRaiders.com. So if you're not a member at Horns247, become an annual member so that you can visit all the VIP content on all the team sites in the 24/7 Sports Network. Jarret, thanks so much for the time, man. I know you're going 100 miles an hour. Really appreciate it.
Hey, I always enjoy coming on all the shows, everything y'all do. Y'all do a great job over there, and I really appreciate when we when they play each other and we get to do this kind of content together.
Yeah, absolutely. For Jarret Johnson, I am Chip Brown. Until next time here on the Flagship Podcast, thanks for listening. Stay safe and keep the faith.